This week's episode of Discography Discussion was recorded in front of a live YouTube audience on April 14th, 2017. Our guest this evening, Brandon Kellum of American Standards.
To a hockey game, and I'm talking to one of the older guys, and he was asking me, he's like, I heard you're in a band. What do you guys like? And I'm like, oh, we're just, heavy metal, punk influenced and everything. Right. He's like, yeah, but like who? And he throws out, the first band he throws out is In Flames. I'm like, okay, we're a little bit like that. And I'm like, we're a little more like chaotic and everything. He's like, oh, like Dillinger Escape Plan. I'm like, exactly.
Dude,
like that.
That's getting better, really getting warmer. Yeah.
Keep coming.
He's telling me about like when he just caught the last Dillinger show here in Arizona. And I'm like, wow, man, I would not have expected that at all.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Actually, I don't really see that much anymore. With like most of the people I talk to, they're just like, yeah, so it's like Slipknot, right? I'm like, well, yeah, kind of,
It's crazy how Slipknot has really become like the biggest underground, but now obviously not underground at all, but like extreme metal band for like people of all
right.
types of music. Kind of look at them as the pinnacle of heavy music.
Right. I mean, in a lot of ways they are, I guess. I mean, it's weird because like when I was younger and in bands and stuff, I really spent a lot of my time trying to be like the genre definer, the elitist, so to speak. I'd hear somebody would say like, oh, you like stuff like Slipknot, right? I'd be like, no, it's not like Slipknot because Slipknot is a commercialized version of nu metal, and it's just like ridiculous. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's our band, and we sound kind of like Under Oath, and they're like, Under who? Because it was like a little before that,
yeah.
And that was
that's exactly it. Yeah, I think with Slipknot, it's like they were really cool to like for like a good 5 years, like the first 5 years of the 2000s.
Right.
And then just like you said, like a lot of elitists and a lot of people just hated them for a good 10 years. And now they've come back to the point where they're like, they're the biggest band out there and like in that style.
Right. Playing out sold out stadiums and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's kind of weird though, because I don't feel like your traditional hardcore show would really work in that setting. I like it.
Oh yeah, not at all. No, I think they're a band that definitely writes for the venues they play at, and I think it takes a marketing team and a team of people to make a band understand what that means.
Right, for sure. But anyway, we're gonna get our plugs and stuff out of the way now. We're obviously you're listening to Discography Discussion. It's a podcast that we do a lot, and this is a little different for us. This is actually, I don't know if you knew this, Brandon, but you're actually our first band guest because we're still a relatively new podcast, and so it's been kind of fun just to see where it's gone. And so this week we're actually going to get together and we're going to talk about just stuff that we like. It's not going to be like a regular band interview where we're like, what are your influences? Do you guys have any crazy tour stories? When's the new album coming out? Even though I haven't heard the new album, I'm sure it's great, like all that stuff. But we are available to stream on Google Play. We're available to stream on pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. We're there. We're on iTunes. What was that other one, Joe? TuneIn Radio?
We're on TuneIn Radio as well as Stitcher. So if you have an Amazon Echo product, you can say to it, Alexa, play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, and she will play that shit.
Dude, people are going to get pissed because every time you say that, if you're listening to it out loud, it's probably going to do that.
Maybe I should change it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would say computer, but now that's a keyword.
Discography is kind of a hard word to pronounce too, so I mean that's going to be a little rough for them, right?
Right. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it works swimmingly well with us, but we're used to saying it clearly,
And for those that can hear what Skype sounds like, this is Brandon from American Standards. What's going on, man?
Hey, not much, man. I apologize in advance. I'm your first guest, so I'm probably also going to be your first letdown. Hopefully it doesn't happen often after me. The buck stops here.
Right.
Oh, come on now.
Well, next show, I think we're going to actually have another podcaster on, which will be kind of fun. He'll be like, dude, your guys' setup is dick, But, yeah, so kind of the focus of this show is we're going to do plugs at the end. We are going to talk about American Standards a bit, and we're gonna probably shoehorn all that towards the end. which is all good stuff that you guys definitely need to know if you haven't heard it on the various podcasts that they've been on already. This week we're kind of just talking about bands that we liked. So I mean, it's kind of the influences question a little bit. I know Joe took a shit ton of notes.
Most of my notes are on the albums of yours that are released at this point.
Oh wow, that's intense.
I mean, I had to sit down and listen to it. I mean, when the first person that you see on Twitter that says, "Hey, we should do something," I'm like, okay, now I have to immediately go and listen to everything you've done twice.
Right.
Once again, I apologize for that.
Oh, dude, come on.
You know what I do? This is kind of my plan. I kind of put myself down before other people's can. It works.
Right. Well, you know, we're gentlemen, so like if we ever decided to do exact reviews of every single release, we would definitely do it while you weren't there to input for it.
Well, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, man, we listened to it, and my God, you know.
I am waiting for the first horrible. Either first off, I would like a really horrible review of the new album.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I want that just to be self-deprecating, or I want a good review, but to go to that page and see that they've also blasted other bands.
Right.
Instead, what I typically get is like this review that compares us to all the greatest bands that we've ever loved growing up.
Yeah.
And then I look at every other review they've done, and they kind of compare them to similar bands.
Yeah, that's a little annoying. I hate the band comparison anyway, because like, you know, oh, you guys play chaotic, you know, hardcore or metalcore or whatever you want to call it. And it's like, oh, well, so that's like the Chariot, right? And it's like, yeah, I mean, kind of, but other than the fact that we're different human beings and, you know, with different lyrics and different songs and different album titles. And yeah, it's like, yeah.
I mean, we've got Josh Scoggin yelling for it, but whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's all over it.
He shows up at our live shows, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I guess if you're Norma Jean, that happens like on the weekly, right?
Right.
He's like that's got to be really shitty though for them. Like if you like all the fans are out there to see him, and it's one of those things where okay, and I'm gonna preface this by saying I love pretty much everything the Gene has done. You know, even the newer stuff that's not as chaotic, that's more rocky, all that stuff. But they get in front of a group of people and they start playing, and everybody's like, man, so when are you guys gonna play the Bless the Martyr stuff?
Yeah, right.
Like,
and that's what they end it with too. You know, they end it with Memphis will be laid to waste. Pretty much. We've done 4 or 5 shows with them in the last couple of years. We actually did just their 10-year tour not too long ago, and they ended it every night with that song.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Oh man, but yeah. So Norma Jean, they were huge Solid State. So when I'm definitely more of a Solid State than Tooth and Nail guy. So if you want to jump over to Tooth and Nail at some point, you just do it, and I'll just. Deal.
Are we going to have like a Red Rover session where you two square off and are like, you know, Solid State, Tooth and Nail?
I don't know about all that. I mean, did you listen to American Standards?
I think we're both on the Solid State side.
Absolutely.
Most of the stuff I like from Tooth and Nail was stuff that was
we
released.
need a counterpoint. So if you want to take the counterpoint.
Right.
He's real good at that.
I am good at being the dick in the conversation, but I think in this case, it's going to work swimmingly well. But, I'll just kind of start off giving a little bit of a history of like Tooth and Nail Solid State for me was my first release it was actually on Tooth and Nail, believe it or not, was Bow by Focused, which is like really going back. And it's so old that the Tooth and Nail logo doesn't even look right on the album. Like they didn't have their official logo yet, so it was like it just said like in just big plain letters on the back of the CD, Tooth and Nail, and then they just put this huge rectangular box around it.
Oh no! Is that right around the start of it, like 1994 or 5, somewhere around there?
Somewhere like there, yeah. I actually think that one might have been 93. And if you've listened to this podcast. Oh. You'll know that I never actually check the dates or prep myself up for these at all. So I could be dead wrong about that. But yeah, it was around that era. And that
shocked me. You say this stuff with so much confidence, man. As I'm binging like some of the podcasts today and yesterday. Yeah, I'm like, wow, you guys know everything. But I think you just say it really confidently, so no one questions it, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm a technician where I work, and so you have to say everything like you've been working there for 30 years, you know. So I kind of
you've been doing that your whole life, as long as I've known you.
Shut up, Joe. But yeah, so that was me. It definitely was like focused and strong arm and focal point and stuff. And that was whenever I really wasn't on the chaotic metalcore train yet. So I didn't even I don't even think I was fully prepared for what was to come.
Yeah, no, on my side, I think I probably didn't get into it a little bit later than you. I mean, it's I know you guys had your own episode on Zayo, but I think it probably wasn't until around Splinter Shards, around was it 96, 97, that I really started getting into it. Yeah. And I kind of, I worked my way back, and I listened to some stuff from Tooth and Nail, like Frodus and MXPX.
Oh, Frodus.
Yeah, exactly. I love those guys. Not a lot of people really talk about how influential they were in that kind of scene.
Oh yeah, they were huge, and it was weird that they were signed to Tooth and Nail, right? Because they were the Christian label at that time, and Frodus definitely was not that. MXPX, I guess I got that a little bit off of, but yeah, it's kind of funny how that's known as the Christian label, yet was one of the most had some of the most influential bands in the genre on that label.
Yeah, with Tooth and Nail, they had several gold albums. I think one of them obviously was Under Oath to Find a Great Line one was huge for them, selling over 500,000 copies. But then MXPX was another one that went gold too. So I don't know that Solid State's ever had anything like that, and it definitely won't in the music environment today now.
No, probably not. Solid State sadly isn't what it was, and that is personal opinion. I think whenever they let's say if I started a band tomorrow and put out a couple of EPs and was signed to Solid State, I think it's one of those things where I feel like you do moderately well, but I don't see it on the same. You can't expect to go in and have the same success as Under Oath or even I think Demon Hunter's probably the highest selling band on that label right now, and it's not really pushing the genre.
Yeah, that's true. But I will say between the two, because I was just curious, and maybe I'm a little more old school, and I don't keep up on new bands. But when I was looking at the current roster for Solid State compared to the current roster for Tooth and Nail, there's not a hell of a lot of stuff on Tooth and Nail that I even know about, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was really into Tooth and Nail probably around the time, 2002 to 2004. So, at that time they had all the good bands. They had Emery, they had
Me
Without You, yeah, and those bands like that.
As Cities Burn was
another
good
one. Dude, no joke. I was at a Goodwill today and I bought a brand new copy of Now Come Sleep by As Cities Burn, still sealed and everything, for $1. I was like, hell yeah.
Nice. Did you happen to catch the 10-year, the 10-year tour they just had? Or not 10-year, I'm sorry, the reunion tour.
I'm actually really pathetic when it comes to attending shows. Norma Jean was in town on Tuesday and I didn't go because, bullshit reasons.
You guys are from where is it? Somewhere in
St. Louis,
Midwest, South. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. We're actually going to be coming through St. Louis here on the 24th. We're playing in Kansas City, I believe.
Okay.
Or not St. Louis. I'm sorry, Missouri.
Yeah, we'll definitely need to meet up or eat a taco or something.
Let me write that down.
There you go.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Is the Blank Space still out there in St. Louis in downtown? Music venue?
I believe it is still there. Yes. Have not been.
Yeah, we played there a few years ago. I remember the place was really cool, but the show was the weirdest show. We played with a 9 Inch Nails style band,
and then
a Rob Zombie style band. Mm-hmm. It was just really weird. It was in some basement of the music venue.
Right. Yeah. So here's the weird thing about St. Louis is that it is not a very hardcore friendly town. Because we about 10 years ago we tried to make it in St. Louis and it did not go well. We played with bands that were just it's like a time capsule. We played with a band, and again, this is years and years and years ago, called Shatter Mask, and they were probably the biggest local St. Louis band that existed. And I would say at best, maybe they sounded kind of like Mudvayne,
Nice. LD50 genre Mudvayne or era Mudvayne?
No, not the good stuff. It was like a rapcore kind of thing.
It was very 90s.
Yeah, so we walk in, right?
Okay.
We walk in and we're wearing our tight pants and Under Oath shirts or whatever. And actually, I think I was wearing an Opeth shirt, just to see there's more to me than just this or something. But yeah, we played at this underground venue called the Red Sea, and I walk in. And we're playing to Shatter Mask fans, okay? Nobody's heard of our band. We're nothing to these people, just blank slate. And we get up there and I start screaming and everything kind of goes a little nuts or whatever. Nobody's doing anything. We're thrashing out on the stage Chariot style, and these people are just standing there wearing their like Hot Topic pants from, you know, and all these people are like 36, 37 at this point, and they're like wearing their Hot Topic pants with like big chains coming down, and they got like neon blue highlights in their hair and stuff. So it's just like, what the hell is happening? I feel like we just walked into like 1998.
It's surprising how often that still happens, where I'm like, they still make people like this?
Right, yeah.
I mean, nothing against them, but it surprises me that I'm like, I personally got out of this, 15 years ago, and I guess that's just selfish me thinking that when I stop liking something, everybody else stops liking it.
Right, yeah.
But that is not the case.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, around that time, so like that kind of gives a little point too. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on where you grow up, and growing up listening to like Tooth and Nail and Solid State bands. I mean, it was a very, 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 very slim pickings on like who was going to check that stuff out with you, And
yeah,
it wasn't so bad with the hardcore stuff, like Strong Arm and Focused and stuff. I feel like Slipknot fans and Korn fans and stuff, like they'd listen to it and they'd be like, oh, that's pretty good, like
it's not as heavy.
Yeah, but then like I bought a record called "Embrace the Eternal" by Embodiment.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've heard that one, but oh my god,
it's some heavy stuff.
It is some heavy shit. Yeah, like I mean, just ridiculous,
Sounds like exactly half of their discography too, because they changed like every album.
Yeah, they ended up being like indie rock, I think, towards the end. Which we've all been there. But yeah, so like that, Embrace the Eternal was crazy. I had Living Sacrifice Reborn at that point, which was also super heavy. But all that stuff was still, predominantly, metal. I don't think I really started getting into more chaos type stuff until I got Blood and Fire, which was several years after it came out. But
Blood and Fire was around like 98, and 98 in general, I feel like, and maybe this is just me, was just a good year for music. That's right when I was in like junior high. So it's like that transformative time where like you stop listening to what your parents and your older brother like kind of show you, and you start finding your own music.
Right.
So you've got Zao, like Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest. That's the same year that Refused, The Shape of Punk to Come came out.
Oh my god, yeah, that's a great record.
Yeah, and both in the same year, like two insanely phenomenal albums for their respective genres, and both at the time that I'm finding my own music. So it was just a good year for music.
Yeah, for sure. 98 was great. Blood and Fire. It's so funny too because on the Zao DVD, Jesse Smith says like, I don't care what scene kid is watching this, watching this DVD. He's like, you can't tell me, and I'm paraphrasing heavily here. He's like, you can't tell me that, you'd heard anything like Blood and Fire before it came out.
It's a little cocky, but I like it. I mean, I appreciate that.
It's weird too because the first time I watched that Zao DVD, I thought, man, Jesse Smith is such a dick. Like, he's such a jerk. I hate his guts, blah, 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 blah. And this is like 10, 12 years ago, something like that, when that DVD came out. But it's funny because you listen to the content of what he says, and most of it is like dead on. Like, you can tell he's been in the industry for a long time. He's super jaded. He doesn't come across as nice or anything, but everything that he says is
just matter of fact.
Yeah, it's very dead on. It causes average people to be like, "Oh, well, he should be nicer." And, but like, I watch it now and I just get a huge chuckle out of it. Because I'm like, yeah, he's right. But yeah,
no, I agree. So going back to the two labels themselves, you said you're very strongly in the Solid State camp. Is that the same for you, Joe, or do you have a preference between the two?
I was never as strong into it as Dan was. I like to think that I'm the person that got Dan into metal because before that it was grunge and punk. And when I was hanging out, playing guitar, practicing Metallica songs and things like that, Dan just out of nowhere discovers this band called Zao. Prior to that, Tooth and Nail for us was essentially like all Project 86.
Yeah.
Heaviest thing we'd ever heard, even though it wasn't the heaviest thing. But then out of nowhere, he pops up with Zao, and then Dan was in a different world for like 5 years until Zao finally like sunk into my brain and I got it. And I think I talked about it on the podcast. Like I saw that DVD and it humanized them, and then I'm the guy that's trying to catch up with all these really good heavy bands that Dan has known about for years. And
okay,
a lot of Me Without You, a lot of stuff like American Standards, Old, Norma Jean, Chariot. I think actually when I first listened to your album Still Life, my notes were Sneaky Little Zayo Much and Norma Jean and the Chariot at the same time. And it was
nice. I'll take it.
I think my most random comment was I was at work and the 4 words that came out of my mouth were paradigm, alt, shift, delete, me without you. I have no idea what I meant when I said it, but that's kind of where I'm catching up. Dan's always been ahead in the tooth and nail solid state extreme department.
Well, you've pegged us absolutely to a T with that. I think for me, I think much like you guys, I was kind of really into bands like Pantera because my older brother, I have a brother that's 9 years older than me, so he got me into these really heavy bands like Pantera, but also listened to stuff like Beastie Boys and stuff like that.
Sure.
Right. But when I first came across Zayo, I was like, holy shit, this is something completely different, and that's why at that time I had no insight into labels or really even cared about record labels, And when I got into Zayo, I'm like, I have to find more like this. So that's when I started digging into the other bands that kind of sounded like that. And I started finding out that, wow, there's a lot of great stuff from Solid State. Tooth and Nail, which I didn't even know actually until today, to be really honest, actually was before Solid State. I think because I thought Solid State was better, I thought Solid State owned Tooth and Nail as a subsidiary.
Right, it's the exact opposite, yeah.
How many times have I heard you correct people on that, Dan? It's like, hey, Tooth and Nail's like this. No, it's not.
Come on, man. I'm not that big of a jerk.
Well, I'm glad I did my research before this because you would have corrected me.
I'd have been like, oh my God, man. Why don't you just go back to the drawing board?
Yeah. It's almost like if you think like Dr. Pibb owns Dr. Pepper because you like Dr. Pibb more. That's not the case.
Right, yeah. It's like, no, I don't know about that. I agree, though. To me, Solid State's the big label, and then Tooth and Nail's what I check out if I'm bored on listening to Solid State stuff.
Although if you look at the album sales, it would say completely different, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look at bands like Amberlin that came out of Tooth and Nail. They're huge.
Yeah, exactly.
And Under Oath, and the band that I'm a little the weirdest about as far as Tooth and Nail Solid State is He Is Legend. In that I fucking love their stuff. And I can't figure out why they're not bigger.
Yeah, and their new album that just came out too, I feel like it started to walk the line of some of these could probably be radio, hard rock radio hits.
Right.
And then some of this stuff also has a more mature vibe that's maybe a little too chill or mellow for the radio.
Sure.
And then they still have a little bit of edge to it. So it's the best of all those worlds. But in all honesty, this is my opinion of that, and also of a lot of bands, is if you're not doing something shocking that's really grabbing the teenage demographic, so grabbing the new people just like Zayo grabbed us,
right?
You're not going to grow as a band. You're only going to grow appreciation from the people that have a nostalgia for you. So just like Norma Jean, where people wait for Memphis Has Been Laid to Waste, with He Is Legend, people wait for I Am Hollywood to play,
Right, that's true. It's weird. My favorite He Is Legend is probably It Hates You, which was their most rock, sounding album. Honestly, I also think the lyrics creep people out because, me and my wife were driving. We were driving down to an Easter egg hunt or something recently, within the past few days, and I was listening to. I think I was listening to "Suck Out the Poison," and that first song comes on, and my wife's like, "Wow, his lyrics are just really rapey sounding."
Wow,
I was like. Yeah, I never really picked up on that because I'm not typically afraid of being raped, but
privilege.
Anything's
man.
Anything's possible. But it comes off rapey, and then I listened to a lot of He Is Legend. After that, I've listened to a lot of He Is Legend lately, and I was like, wow, yeah. So he's got that one song where he's like, you can kick and scream if you feel better, but you'll never get away. And then on Attack of the Dungeon Witch, he's like, if you got the magic, then I got the moves. We'll see who wakes up next to who. And it's just she's right. It is kind of rapey.
I hope on their new press release for this new album that comes out or that just came out, they have the quote, Discography Discussion says, it sounds kind of rapey.
Sounds a little rapey. It's their rapiest album yet.
When are you going to start writing album reviews again?
Right.
A dash with your name by it, man. A dash with your name by it.
Right. Oh, God, I hope not.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Solid State and Tooth and Nail were the two labels that actually made me start taking note of like what label bands were on. And then outside of those, I mean, the only labels that have even to this day done that for me, although I think too.
You just cut out. Go ahead and say that again.
Just exact same.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying. So outside of Solid State and Tooth and Nail, those were the only labels that really got me into looking at what bands were on the label and taking notice of that. And then outside of that, I just saw, like Trust Kill and Ferret Records were the only two other big ones that I really got into, a big chunk of the bands on the label.
Oh, yeah. Ferret was notorious for that. Notorious with me. And even Victory, I don't, there were a lot of bands on Victory that I liked that were more of like the punk hardcore style. Trust Kill was just great because it had Poison the Well. Oh my God.
Hope's Fall. I mean, you're
Hope's
talking about.
Fall. Sorry, I get a little.
Destiny Hope's Fall days,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We're doing Hope's Fall next week if you want to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. We are doing that. Dude, fucking Hope's Fall. Sorry, I can't. We'll save it. But like.
Another band that had rapey lyrics that was on Trust Kill is Fight Paris. Did you ever listen to them?
Yeah. And it's weird because I never thought to look at bands in that regard until like just the other day. I was like, what bands sound rapier than other bands? Like Glassjaw. Glassjaw sounds very rapey.
I thought Glassjaw was the only one that sounded rapey.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, just on
Fight
that
Paris
first album.
essentially had the 80s rock mythos into a hardcore band, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. The only other band I could think of that did that too was what were they called? It'll come to me like as soon as we're done doing this podcast. But there's another band that had kind of like that 80s rock and roll mentality. God, I really wish I could remember that name. It had the word.
More recently, there's this band called Wilson, and they've kind of got that same vibe.
Okay, yeah, I haven't heard them yet.
They're a little like they started like Mailing the Sons of Disaster, and then they went just kind of like butt rock.
Right, butt rock.
Good butt rock if they're listening, but it's still butt rock.
So let's talk about butt rock for a second.
I already got Under Oath pulled up.
No, that's not what I mean. So like about 10 years ago, I started referring to bands that I didn't like as butt rock. Like, and not even, but then over time it developed into, I'm not just talking about bands I don't like, but like bands that play a particular style. Like even He Is Legend could be accused of being butt rock at times. And,
I would say that.
And, but it became like that Creed, Nickelback, Pearl Jam kind of sound. There were times where I'll even call bands like AC/DC and accept butt rock, But it's really weird because over the years I've started hearing other people use the term, and I've been trying to determine, did I just start saying that, or did I hear it subliminally and start saying it as if it was brand new,
I feel like you've probably imparted it onto the world, and we all just took your lead.
Maybe.
Take that nugget, Dan.
I didn't have a voice, back then. There was no getting on the internet and doing a podcast back then.
All those End of Destiny shows.
Exactly. You were the hardcore guy talking between the set. All right, I want to preach to you about butt rock.
Right. Let's talk about butt rock for 5 seconds. I know it sucks when a band gets up and preaches for 45 minutes, but this is hardcore, baby. Yeah. Oh, man. So speaking of that, actually, what impact? So going back to the whole Christian label thing. Now, so I was raised in a very religious, conservative place. We were Pentecostal. We didn't have TV. We didn't have any of that shit. And so that was the weird thing about Tooth and Nail Solid State was that with them being the Christian label, it was one of those weird exceptions where like no one cared. There wasn't the backlash that like the 80s Christian metal bands had, like Stryper and all that, where people were like, oh, well, this is Christian metal. Like you go listen to Blood and Fire. It's one of the greatest fucking metalcore records you've ever heard. But the lyrics are very religious, like it's, and, even Splinter Shards, which is to me like a perfect example of old school hardcore, very religious lyrics. And in my mind, it's almost like the preaching is almost a part of it, even with the bands that weren't Christian, like, like bands like Earth Crisis and stuff. We're talking about veganism and, everybody's still straight edge as all hell, Yeah,
no, I've got to imagine, in part that's likely because like 80% of people probably don't even care to look and read the lyrics, you know?
Sure.
And you've got a band like Zayo, and if you're not really listening through over and over again, you might not be picking up on those undertones.
Right.
But coming from maybe a completely different background than you, I did when I was younger. I actually went to church with some friends and neighbors and things like that. My family was not religious by any means. I even got to the point where we used to do this like Bible quizzing and stuff. But as I went into like a teenager, I kind of decided to fall out of that. I think my kind of philosophy on all is I always want to know about something before I decide if I like it, don't like it, believe in it, or otherwise.
Well, that's smart. I mean,
so I'm not a religious guy by any means, but I love so many tooth and nail bands and solid state bands. And I think to me, it never sounded super preachy. It never sounded like they were trying to convert you or like come into their way of thinking. It just that completely went over my head, and I just said, this is insane music, so I never felt like they were pushing that on me. Granted, I don't know if between songs they're talking about that, and I know some of the bands actually do, but at least I never had that vibe. So I guess one question I would ask you is, do you think that some of these bands on these labels, that their goal of it is to, say, convert people or bringing people into their way of thinking? And do you think if that's the case that it is effective for anybody,
Not really, because I have been the lead singer of a Christian hardcore band before. So I have a very interesting perspective on that. I think when it starts, I think it comes from a very sincere place. And I'm talking the more preachy, the more let's go convert people mindset, which we had that a little bit. And but it wasn't like it came from a very sincere place at first. Like, we're trying to do something really good for people and something that we think personally is going to improve their lives or whatever. But the problem with that is that's all good. I don't think anybody has any issue with that statement. But whenever you say we're a Christian band and like you get up there and like, because if you're a Christian hardcore band, the first place you're playing is church 90% of the time. You're playing with a bunch of local bands, you're playing at a church. So you get up on stage and you're like, hey, we're into Destiny and we're doing this for the Lord, and all, and you get all excited about it, and you get all these amens, you get all these hand claps or whatever, and then you go play your second show at a local venue with a bunch of local punk bands, and you start saying all that stuff on stage, and people are like, "It's just like crickets," Nobody's gonna beat your ass over it, but they're not. They're not convinced. And so you start thinking, well, we're being persecuted. I seriously hear white people say the word persecuted more than anybody else that I've ever heard. And it comes from that whole like, well, they didn't like our band, so we're being persecuted. So I think certain bands establish an attitude at that point and kind of move forward in the whole, we're going to be super evangelical. And that's where you get bands like Sleeping Giant and For Today and that are just very over-the-top evangelical
really
bands. Yeah, and they've got good music, so I still listen to them. But, for me personally, when I was doing it, I kind of reached this idea of, okay, well, we're telling everybody that we're Christians, and automatically that sets us up to actually, when you take that title, you kind of have to take everything that goes with it, right? So suddenly it's a big deal that I say fuck all the time. So,
I think we've had a big breakthrough with you, Dan, today. This is in progress. We're making progress here.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm in a therapy session. But it becomes a big deal. It becomes a big deal that we say curse words, or it becomes a big deal that we drink. And and it was all stuff that was like kind of not that big a deal before, but for some reason when you get up on a stage, everybody's kind of looking at you like you're like a pastor. Yeah, like you're a pastor of a church or something.
You definitely end up in this situation where you are. It's polar. There is no middle ground. You're either preaching to the choir at that point or nobody cares.
Yeah, it becomes politics, right? It's religion, politics,
right.
all those. I mean, the same bands that are now kind of doing that, rally against Trump or rally against, the other side. I think they had that same pull or that same visceral reaction. And I almost wonder, especially for the Christian metalcore scene, if it did convert anybody, I feel like it may have converted as many people as it possibly turned off, if not more, because you've got people that maybe were on the fence, and then they listen to these bands and they see that they're a positive influence and they hear the things they're saying. And if they do decide to go that route, you might also have people that are firmly in the church. They listen to a band like Zayo and then they say, wow, this is awesome. And then they start going into bands like Carcass, which are very secular.
Right.
And then they start saying, wow, there's some really cool stuff out there. And there's also drugs and sex and alcohol and all this other great stuff, you know?
Sure, yeah, it could quote unquote lead them down the wrong road. But like, you know, I think all that is silly. I think from a personal perspective, and we really don't like to talk about religion on this show too much, but it's worth mentioning because we do cover Christian bands and stuff like that at times. And I think it's just one of those things where, in my personal opinion, is I just don't feel like music is a valid tool for like real ministry. Like the idea of like the snake oil salesman that pulls into your town and converts half the town to his way of thinking. And then he just leaves. Yep. And then over time, the town just kind of returns to normal, like the way that it was before. You might have a few fringe fanatics that still stick with it, but for the most part, you know, as far as like a Christianity perspective goes, it's like if you really want to minister to people and you really want to make a positive change in people's lives, then you know you go out, you clothe the homeless, you feed people that don't have help, you give people money that don't have money, you establish friendships with people that feel like they have no one to talk to. And to me, that's first of all, that's basic human being stuff anyway, like regardless of religion, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the basic human being stuff is what you can impart on people and aspire for them to follow that and not necessarily follow the title that you've placed above it.
Right. I mean, if you hang out with somebody for a long time and they're like, you know what, I'm going to give this Jesus thing a shot, then, you know, great, you did your job or whatever. But like beyond that, I think you get to take home with you the idea that, yeah, I made a positive change in this person's life, instead of it being like, okay, I'm in a Christian hardcore band and we travel all around the United States and we play a show and we do an altar call at all of our shows, and now, you know, we converted all these people or whatever, but then we leave, and these fans, they have no real personal connection with the band members, you know. Yeah. So it's really just kind of a farce in that regard, and that's really all I'm going to say about it, without like pissing off anybody that, you know.
Every listener that right now is tuning out.
Oh my god!
But no, I agree. I mean, I would say, like, and maybe this is a weird connection, but I almost say in the sense of like country music fans have this kind of really devoted, or country music bands, I guess, have this really devoted fan base and people that like kind of live that whole lifestyle when they go to these festivals and shows. It's this whole thing that like they've already got this built-in crowd, you know. And with the bands that were doing this back with these Christian metalcore bands, I feel like when they were playing shows that were, like you said, at churches or at like Cornerstone, for example,
right,
they had a built-in fan base that was supporting them, and a lot of the churches were also, you know, using money to fund these tours. I mean, I know of several bands personally that were touring off the church money.
Sure.
And I think just like you said, maybe once they stepped out of that realm, it became a little more polar because, yeah, you do an altar call at a predominantly secular metal show, and you're going to have a lot of people that hate it just because of that, even if you're a great band.
Right.
So I think it really limited a lot of the bands, but the bands that did it well are the bands that did exactly what you said. They showed, they give an example of how you can use music for a positive, I guess, result, but didn't necessarily preach it to people, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that's, to me, that's the best formula to have, if you want to call it a formula. But yeah, and the weird thing about Tooth and Nail Solid State, though, is that like it really, like, I never really, like you said, I never really got that vibe off of like most of the bands. You know, it was always a Face Down Records, a totally different story, but Face Down was like if you were too Christian for Solid State, you know? Like, you know. It's like, well, okay, hold on. We actually want to sell this at Best Buy, you know? Like,
you know, the one band that did do it, and not to linger on the religion thing too long,
sure,
but the one band that has kind of taken their own spin on this lately is the guys in Emory. So Matt and Toby and them, they started a label which actually I worked for about a year and a half or so, called BC Music.
Bad Christian.
Yeah, so I did a lot of their press release and their shopping to like radio and XM and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they're awesome guys, but now they've got this podcast where they kind of show like, hey, you can be Christian and you can drink and you can curse and you can have these thoughts, and that's okay, you know. And a lot of people cling to it because they've given this example of that.
Sure.
And then there's also obviously more traditional people that absolutely hate them because of it. But I think it's interesting to take that approach, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my wife's not a fan of the Bad Christian podcast, but I've listened to everyone, usually with her in the car. And
did you hear the mailing one they did last week?
I haven't been as caught up since we started doing this podcast because it's kind of taken over my life a little bit. But but yeah,
I was in tears, man. I almost in tears. I was almost in tears is what I meant.
Yeah.
And he was talking about Pokemon Go, and I was still almost in tears, you know, playing it with his son, you know, for the first time that he was able to see any kind of vision again, you know?
Yeah, I got nothing but mad respect for Dallas, you know? Like, it's one of those, like, it was so horrible when I heard about that accident that he was in because, you know, he was one of my favorite vocalists, you know, even in the Under Oath days, you know, like,
yeah,
I would tell people, it's funny too, because I would tell people that the Dallas Under Oath was better, his vocals were better or whatever, which is kind of funny because if you, it's probably really mean, but if you pull up a video of the Dallas Under Oath playing and then you pull up a video of the new Under Oath playing the same song, Spencer's heads and tails above, and as far as in a live setting, you know, at least at that time.
More control,
right?
He has more control,
right? I mean, Dallas really bloomed in Maylene, you know, like he really found his stride, and you know, so when I heard about that accident, I was like, oh man. And as a selfish music fan, you know, of course, and from a human perspective, I'm like, oh my god, that is so terrible. You know, here, PayPal, take my money, you know, and then. After that, though, it was like, oh, man, so it's going to be a long time before we get any new mailing.
And I mean, based on that interview, I don't know if it's even coming. Not to give you a spoiler alert, but
not anytime soon, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, I hope he does to pull through to a point where he can do that again. But yeah, he talks about a lot of problems, you know, with his throat and just talking in day to day, you know, and he's basically cooped up in his parents' room. He says, you know, he just stays there in the dark all day, and you might not even see a person for an entire day.
Oh my goodness, that's torture.
Yeah, so it's. Well, I guess we get away from the downer stuff, right? So,
right, sure, yeah.
Who on the labels did you not like?
What labels did I not like?
No. Who on the Tooth and Nail or Solid State labels did you not care for?
Ooh, this is rough.
You're talking to a fanboy here, so
yeah,
he's gonna have to dig deep.
Full fanboy. Okay, so
were you a fan of POD? Was that a big one for you?
Like way back in the day, like when my idea of heavy,
Southtown, right?
Yeah,
Southtown,
yeah. Like my idea of heavy was, you know, Korn, you know, like,
yeah.
Sure. POD was okay. I never was really like a huge, like I didn't wear the T-shirts or you know, or get the tribal tattoos or anything like that. But yeah, I thought POD was okay, especially on those earlier records.
People be talking about Satellite, and Dan's walking around going, "Come on, Brown!"
Right? Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you know, POD, and I guess this is one of my most controversial opinions. I don't really like August Burns Red that much.
You know what? I would not disagree with you. I enjoy their music to a certain extent, but I've kind of I nerd out over these podcasts, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and you've got yourself a new weekly listener with me, really, just because that's what I drive all day. You know, I drive and I fly a lot.
Appreciate that.
I listen to podcasts.
That's awesome.
But with August Burns Red, I've heard him on several interviews, and he's so off-putting in the way that he talks about you know, the meanings behind the songs, and even how he approaches religion. That I'm just like, I can get past this, but for them I just can't.
It just sounds a little, I don't know if insincere is the right word. But
exactly. It sounds like like you said, the snake oil salesman that's selling you a product,
right,
and hoping you bite.
Well, and that's what we get with August Burns Red every single album. I mean, so when the first album came out, Thrill Seeker, I thought that was pretty good. You know, it was cool. It was kind of had that Azalea Dying-ish sound to it, except it didn't make me want to kill my wife when I listened to it. And, you know, I don't know, like August Burns Red has so they put out Thrill Seeker, and that was okay. And then they put out Messengers, which I thought was also kind of okay. And then literally every single album they put out since then, which is like, I don't know, like 150 albums, they're just like, it's just like the same shit, different name. And like, it never grew on me. And I never really thought they were doing anything interesting. And of course I just stopped following the band after that. I was like, I just don't really care.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, if they're listening right now, or the label's listening, we're completely down for the tour still. So you can still hit us up.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to make friends with you, Dan, here, and Joe as well. So
there you go.
You know.
Yeah, I'll show up and I'll show up and sell merch for that tour. Yeah.
You know, the other one that I never really got into a whole lot either was Oh Sleeper on Solid State.
Oh Sleeper,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, I say that like not only from the music standpoint, although like I have heard stuff that I like that sounds very much more like Under Oath.
Yeah.
But also they did a reunion recently, which we kind of got thrown on the reunion last second, and they did it as I want to say a 3-piece. So it was a guitarist, a singer, and a drummer, and the drummer was playing sideways, so you could kind of see everything.
Okay.
But we get there for sound check, and they were so triggered up that, you know, they had a patch of bass in, so there wasn't obviously any live bassist.
Right.
They had a track for keyboards. They had a track for the second guitars, which was doing all the solo work or the more lead type stuff, I guess.
Damn.
And then even the drums being sideways, like you can see when they're going into double bass, he was playing like halftime of the stuff and letting the track pick up the other beat.
Wow.
And it sounded fantastic because it sounded just like the album.
Sure.
But it looked really awkward having 3 guys up there, but obviously hearing like 8 or 9 parts.
Right. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, so many bands do that now, but it felt really weird. And it was awkward because people started leaving throughout, you know, the set, some before they even played, but definitely a lot as they were playing. And I just couldn't get into it, you know?
Yeah, I liked their first 2 records. I didn't really listen to the third one or the EP that they put out after that. I mean, I'm sure it's all great or whatever, but like it's one of those things where I was kind of getting out of the whole like sing, scream, Under Oath-y kind of sound. I mean, I liked Under Oath still, but I didn't feel like I had to listen to another band that played that sound.
Yeah, we're old. We can't listen to that same stuff forever, right?
Right.
Assuming,
exactly.
Are you guys in your 30s maybe or late 20s?
I just turned 30.
Yeah, you have a pass now to not listen to every band that sounds like 2005 style, you know?
Right, exactly. Sadly, there's not a lot of them.
It does sound like that's come out here recently. Have you listened to Silent Planet? I think.
Yeah, I do enjoy their stuff quite a bit actually. Now,
yeah, they've got that vibe, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I like Silent Planet. I don't have. I only have like their latest record, and to be honest with you, I listen to so many records I couldn't even tell you what it's called. Because like since I've gone on I don't know if you listened to the episode where we talked about digital versus like physical formats, but I really am very disconnected with music that I listen to digitally. And I never remember album names. Like I'll literally just be like, cue up latest release by, you know, and just kind of go from there.
That's a byproduct of not going to Tower Records like Friday or Tuesday that music comes out,
right?
And you know, spending $20 on an album. Now you can download it in 2 seconds or listen to it on Spotify. And when you're listening to it on Spotify, it's on shuffle half the time. And you don't even know what the song is or what album it's from to begin with. You know?
Well, yeah, like when you guys, you know, and I'm not gonna lie, we weren't, you know, I had never listened to American Standards before this podcast. And
Dan, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. Dan.
It's so, but
what am I gonna do with this guy?
Well, the thing is, though. Oh shit. Okay, Joe. But you know, but in that case, it was great because I was, you know, Joe's like, "Hey, we just got a tweet," and I was like, "Oh, okay, from who?"
We're sitting in the movie theater getting ready to watch Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and so he shows me this tweet or whatever. I was like, okay, great. So, but that's the beauty of digital music is I was able to become familiar within, you know, a day or two.
On the ride home.
Yeah, so you know that made it kind of special too because it's fresh in my mind, which we don't typically get. You know, we don't really get that too much.
Hopefully, you somewhat liked Power Rangers, so it's kind of like you've got this positive tie to it as well.
I did like Power Rangers.
All right, I was in Charlotte last week. And I you know, it was night. I was by myself. I was trying to kill some time, so I'm like, I'm gonna go check out the new Power Rangers. So
sure.
I go to this new theater that's one of those fancy ones with the recliner chairs where you got to pay $15 for a ticket.
Don't tell me you fell asleep.
No.
Okay.
So I walk up there. I pay my $15 for one, you know, into his 30s man.
Sure.
and then I notice, hey, this place actually has a bar at the movie theater. So now I grab a beer. I walk into Power Rangers and I'm just sitting in like an empty theater by myself on a recliner, drinking a beer, watching Power Rangers.
That's the dream, though, right?
It was enjoyable.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable. I didn't get a tweet from a random band asking me to be on the podcast, but
right.
It was still enjoyable.
That's cool. Yeah. We were just surprised, too, because, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, up to that point, we were kind of like, does anybody even give a shit? you know, because anybody even listening to the podcast. And I mean, we see the downloads, you know, we check, you know, I check all the time, like religiously. And, you know, the downloads are there, but we never get comments. We never get anything, you know, and it's.
Did I pull you guys off the cliff?
I hope so.
Step off that ledge?
I hope so.
All right.
Yeah, for
Good.
sure. Everybody's been really cool, but yeah, it's one of those things where you know we were just super pumped. We were super pumped to do it. But what I was going to say is, you know, when I heard the band, it was really one of those like, I'm going to listen to this to make sure I give a damn, you know, like beforehand.
Fair.
You know,
Fair.
and but I liked it because it's definitely it's right up my alley, you know, so it worked out. Which is funny because people that listen to this podcast, one of the early comments that I did get is people thought that we were just basically going to be talking about like thrash metal like the whole time. And I was like, yeah, you know, we kind of came out of the gate. We did Metallica, then we did Mortification, and we did, you know, and then we did Slayer and all that. And it was like boom, 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 thrash band. It was really just we're trying to get all the big bands out of the way first, you know? Like,
yeah.
But anyway, this podcast shouldn't be about the podcast. So
it's very meta. I like this meta podcast. I mean, I will say real quickly on that, on the social media stuff. I mean, if you see us, we've got tons of followers on social media, but mainly because we've been hustling just as hard as we are today for the past 6 years.
Right.
But just like you guys, I mean, we're not getting this overflow of likes and comments and all this other stuff. We do okay, you know, but for our size, or at least the appearance of our size, we don't. And that's all because the social media algorithms, you know, it's not in your favor unless you want to pump money into it. So if we've got 60, 70,000 people on Facebook, we're playing a show in New York and we post it, it gets shown to 1% of our following, and those people might be on the West Coast.
Right.
So
or here in St. Louis. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those scary things about social media. Like promotion is so hard. I remember like 10 years ago with our old band, we were trying to promote, and it was like
MySpace, right?
It was MySpace.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and actually, our the guy that owned our label that we were on was like very vehement.
In your top 8.
Yeah, he was very vehement about
MySpace.
Like, you need to buy a MySpace robot that just adds friends. Yeah. Like,
oh, okay.
You know, and we were like, I mean, isn't that kind of weird? Like, what, you know, and they're like, he's like, no, this is what it has to do or whatever. Turned out that dude years later, like, he disappeared. He like didn't even have a business license or anything. It was, you know, we were just hoping we would get on Solid State or something, you know, like we just, you know.
Yeah. Did he make you like a really sick layout for your MySpace though? Because if so, it was all worth it.
It was pretty cool. I'll have to log into Wayback Machine and see if I can pull the old End of Destiny MySpace page. But yeah, so I mean, kind of back to those labels though. It's kind of weird how those labels have gotten huge. Like they were like, I would have said in like 2006, 2007 that Solid State was like the biggest label as far as those kind of bands went, which the truth is it was probably Victory, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as like my perspective was, I felt like that was like the biggest label. It was the ideal label to be on. But you've got the interesting perspective in that you've actually, you know, toured with those bands. A lot of them. I mean, we were lucky, like we could open for one of those bands when they came to town, you know. But like, It wasn't, you know, we weren't like touring machines or anything. So, is that just kind of a facade, like thinking Solid State is the shit, or is it like were the band's always like typically happy? I mean, you don't have to say like I talked to X band on this day and they said this, but you know.
No, I do. I mean, I will say, I mean, I probably also have a very skewed perception of it too, because at the time that I really got into it, it had such a like mythos to it that I was just starstruck from the idea of these bands, you know, when I first started playing music. So because of that, I think I still hold on to that. Like when I look back, like of that being this awesome nostalgic time that had no like negativity to it at all.
Sure.
Since then, we've definitely played with a lot of the bands. I mean, like Solid State bands we've done with Emery. We played multiple shows with his Legend, like Oh Sleeper. We've got that Zayo show coming up. Mm-hmm. Even like As Cities Burn. Hell, like when we first played with As Cities Burn, I think it was before their second album came out, and they were blowing up pretty big. They were kind of like, I think, hyping them up to be the next Under Oath.
Sure.
And we did like several shows with those guys. And funny like side story, they built this basically little toy or thing that you'd all hold on to this handle and it'd be plugged into this battery.
Yeah.
And then this light would blink, and then if you're the last person to press the button when the light stopped blinking, you'd get shocked.
Oh, nice.
And like I've seen these before at like novelty shops, but this thing was on like steroids. Like it would shock the hell out of you. And they brought that to every damn show, and so we'd be out behind the venue playing that little thing with them, you know.
That's awesome.
But, so I've got really fond memories of it, but also like now it seems like since I've personally been playing in bands for about 15 or 16 years, and we've kind of lucked out as all these 10-year anniversaries of tours start coming through, and we get lucky enough to play some of them.
Sure.
That talking to some of these guys, and like you said, maybe I don't want to put any of them on blast or anything.
Sure. I've
definitely heard I've heard a few things. I've heard one, the whole idea that, you know, they started as a very Christian band and now they feel like they can't get themselves out of that, or can't say openly that they're not about that anymore, because that's kind of what's built their image.
Yeah.
And then more often than not, and this is possibly the most depressing thing that I hear from tons of bands that we play with, is just the idea that it's like, I've been doing this since I was 16. I don't know what else to do, and I'm in my mid 30s or sometimes in my 40s, you know?
Right.
So it's like, I don't want to do this, but I just don't know what else I can do, you know?
Right. It's like I'm trapped in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like people feel like, well, either I play in the band and I have to play these songs that maybe I wrote 15 years ago because that's all people care about.
Right.
Or I've got to, you know, run a record label or work at a tattoo shop or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the depressing part, because you almost always see in a lot of the bands that you've got 2 or 3 guys, maybe 1 or 2 guys actually, that are still like really behind it and still pushing the band forward.
Sure.
And the others are kind of trudging along because it's just all they know.
Right.
And sometimes I hope that I'm not like falling into that, you know.
Sure.
I've done it so long that I'm like, shit, I don't know what else I'm going to do.
Yeah. Since like what, 07 was this band?
Yeah,
I'm sure there were other bands before.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the crux of it. I think Zao was kind of the first ones that were kind of like public about, we're moving away from this image, you know, like we don't want to be perceived as this Christian metalcore band anymore. We want to be, I mean, you can't help how you're perceived, but you know, it just being one of those, like, you know, when you hear a Zao record, they want you to hear where they're at now, like, and not so much, you know, like, yeah, okay, yeah, like they're going to put out Blood and Fire too, because there's tons of people that listen to Zao and they're like, I know they say they're not Christian, but I can definitely hear Christianness in it, you know, and like it's like, yeah, I mean, but I guess if you look for anything hard enough, you'll find it, right? But you know,
yeah,
it just goes so beyond listening to just the music and reading the lyrics and just kind of enjoying it for what it is.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of the bands think they've built a foundation on something, and if they pull out that foundation, the whole building's going to come down.
Sure.
And maybe that's only something that they think, because I think, going back to what I said earlier, I think maybe only 80% of the people actually take their time to find out what a band's about, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, everybody else just kind of like, this is cool. I like it. If it jams, it jams. Yeah. And, yeah, Zao, obviously, it's so hard not to talk about Zao because they absolutely are the reason I'm into this music, you know, and they're just a huge inspiration to me. And that's why I was actually pretty jealous. And you're like, yeah, and then we're going to play with Zao. And I'm like, that's cool.
I have no clue that, like, I mean, you've heard us, and yeah, obviously I have huge influence by Zao. Yeah. But I don't know that we sound anything like Zao.
No.
I've just been a fanboy forever, you know?
Sure.
So I think the way that it came about was completely coincidence. A couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, we tweeted them, Zao, and we just said, hey, let's have some beers and do some tour dates sometime.
Right.
And
they tweeted
style.
Us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they tweeted us back like right away, you know, and said, this sounds like a plan.
Sure.
So when we find out that they're coming back on the West Coast for the first time in over 10 years, we tweeted them again, and we put the picture, and I just said something like, where do I redeem this coupon? And they said something like, we're working on it, or something like that.
Right.
So I think that was one piece of it. Then I think also through kind of like what I did with you guys, where I stumbled across you guys and kind of struck up a conversation. We were on another podcast not too long ago called As the Story Grows with a guy named Travis. And
dude,
Travis and
full
his
disclosure,
friend
Travis is going to be on this on the 28th.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Travis is a great guy. I don't know if he's already said anything about it on his podcast, but we actually did a cover song with him and 2 other podcasts as well, called the Shred, Shredcast, and then also Talk to Me, or Shoot the Shred, sorry, and Talk to Me. So all those guys from podcasts, they all just coincidentally played one instrument, like, one plays drums, one plays bass, one plays guitar, and I'm like, well, I'll do vocals. Let's do a cover song. So we ended up doing a Deftones cover that we're going to put out here pretty soon.
Oh, I got to hear that. Oh, man. I got to hear that.
But so yeah, Travis.
Take my money, please.
Yeah, right. So Travis and his friend Seth, they are pretty close with Zayo. Travis actually has been doing merch for Zayo on their last few show dates, I think. Yeah. And I think Seth has some hands in something. I don't know if it's distribution or otherwise. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, hey, Travis, put in a good word for us if you've got any pull on this. And in a couple hours, we got asked to do the show. I'm like, this is insane. Like, I'm the little 16-year-old girl in me is jumping out and like screaming and crying,
Right. Well, it's funny thing about Travis too. It's weird how this how small the world really is. In this scene, because our band End of Destiny recorded our debut album in Travis's basement.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no clue, man.
Yeah, no clue. It's not something I think anybody involved is all that proud of, but we did it, man. And we actually, there's a clip on one of our songs where his daughter actually, she was real young at the time and just came in and said something into the microphone, and then that ended up on the record, which is cool. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole thing was cool, and it's weird because I hadn't actually talked to Travis in years, since then, and that's actually was my biggest influence for starting this podcast, was listening to As the Story Grows and being like, why am I not doing that? Instead of just like sitting there being bitter that I can't get a band off the ground, or that nobody ever wants to show up, or whatever, or that I'm fat and I don't want to do it.
How do you really feel, Dan? How do you really feel?
Yeah, it's mostly just being fat and lazy, but beyond that, it was crazy because I sent Travis this message and I was like, hey bro, do you remember me? I was blah 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 blah, and he's like, oh yeah, dude, yeah, and then like a few months later, it's like, yeah, now I got my own podcast, and I want you to be on it.
Maybe I'll pencil you in if I've got the time.
Right? Yeah, just being real nonchalant about it, but yeah, no, he's down.
I mean, the beauty of his podcast, and then also from what I've heard of your podcast now, is not that like, hey, how'd you get your band name and who have you played with and stuff. It sounds like a conversation, and that's something I rather listen to than someone talk at me the whole time,
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's I hate listening to podcasts where it's like that. It's always like, what are your top 5 albums for, It's just like, dude, nobody cares. And half the time, the shit's not going to even sound anything like what the band sounds like, Like, it's not, it's weird because it's like every band, like, it, if you get Slayer on the show, you ask them what they've been listening to, and they're like, we've been listening to Tina Turner tapes in our car, It's like, yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Next question,
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's kudos to you and kudos to Travis. And, this segment of the podcast has been brought to you by As the Story Grows.
Absolutely. Could check it
Travis, you could send me a check.
Yeah.
I knew he had something to do with it.
Wait, Travis gets
This was
paid?
all an elaborate ruse.
Travis makes money doing this? What?
Coming to your house.
Right. But yeah.
So going back to the labels, I guess, are there any hidden gems or any bands that you feel like didn't get the appreciation that they should have had from Solid State or from Tooth and Nail?
Ooh, that's rough. Because those are a lot of the bands that only had like one album out.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. There was a band on Solid State that I liked called Your Memorial, which they're not like
I have never heard this.
Well, they're not like, it's not like holy shit, they're great, but like, but I really liked it because a lot of bands, when you hear their first album, you're really just kind of prepping yourself up for the second album because you're going to get to hear what they really sound like as songwriters. And so I thought they had a really cool sound. It was metalcore kind of, but it was kind of light and spacey, which, I love Hope's Fall so much that anytime I hear a band that, it sounds like I'm listening to it in the clouds, like ready to launch into space, that's what I like. So I liked Your Memorial. I'm trying to think of some other bands that were around. I mean, I was really big into the Agony scene whenever they hit Solid State.
Nice.
Talk about bands that are like not Christian that are on Christian labels, and I was really into the Agony scene, that first album, that debut they put out, and I thought that was really good. I think they kind of kind of forced themselves off the label once they realized what it was all about, you know?
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I really liked them. Beloved, I loved back in the day, the band Beloved. They put out one record on Solid State called Failure On, and it was like right at the beginning of my cycle of really loving those bands. And they had kind of like a Poison the Well sound a little bit with more singing. They're really good. Dead Poetic was good for like their first record. And
yeah, I agree. Dead Poet only got me for the first one.
Yeah.
Another one that had a good first record, which I don't know that a lot of people would agree with me, but I actually liked the first Showbread record.
Oh, it's my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, that Mouth Like a Magazine kind of drew me in.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they had the guy playing the guitar and he was just insane on stage.
Yeah.
They put out a documentary, too, a while back that I actually caught on YouTube not too long ago.
Yeah, how Showbread ruined my life or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Showbread, I've actually enjoyed quite a bit of their discography. There's a few misses in there, but for the most part, I loved that first record because it was just so crazy sounding, and it kind of sounded like The Refused a little bit, and
it had a little Blood Brothers in there with the dual vocals. I thought too, like not as crazy or chaotic,
right.
But it definitely had a little of that vibe to it.
Yeah, and they actually had a record out before that was independently released that I never could get a physical copy of. I waited for the band to get done playing one night, and then, I was that fan and just accosted them on the way out, to put their stuff away. And I was like, I want a copy of this first record. And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'll be right back. One of those okay, get in the van, drive. But yeah, I really liked that first record by Showbread. And I liked everything they did after that. It was really weird when they did that Anorexia Nervosa record. The dual record. It sounded like Nine Inch Nails. It sounded a lot like the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, I think I maybe listened to it once or twice, through YouTube.
Well, it was a little up its own butt as far as
sit in a room
concept.
With a lamp. Read when we tell you. Listen when we tell you.
Yeah, it was read these notes that we wrote about the song. It's telling this overarching story, and then every now and again there's a letter that's written in red, so you write that down in a notebook, and I was like, dude, I do not have time for this shit. If I like it, I like it. Let's just move on from there. And Showbread was good. I'm trying to think of some other bands that are around. Emery, obviously, not even a one-hit wonder. I mean, everything Emery puts out is solid gold. Ask me to be on Bad Christian Podcast.
They're the nicest guys too, just ridiculously nice. The same way that we kind of contacted you through Twitter, just through a tweet and Zayo. So maybe Twitter is the new way that you're supposed to get stuff done. Is we actually received a message from Emery on Twitter, in the inbox, which we never even check our Twitter inbox. I didn't even know that was a thing prior to this.
Oh, that's a thing.
And it was a message from Emery, and we thought it was fake or something. It was just like, hey guys, are you on a record label right now? We kind of want to talk to you. Give us a call.
Right.
So we give them a call that day thinking, yeah, right, this has got to be they got hacked or something.
Sure.
And that day we end up Skyping them, and we're doing voice calls with the guys in Emery. And that's when we started, I started kind of helping them with the label. And we played the Emery 10-year with them. And every time they come through, they're just the nicest guys. I cannot say enough good things for them. We actually, the last show we played with them, they invited us back on their tour bus, which what the hell band had a tour bus anymore of that size?
Right, yeah.
And we're sitting in their tour bus, and I was always a fan of Emery, but never a super fan. One of my good friends that came to the show is a super fan, and he, I'm on the tour bus with them. I'm talking to Matt, and the next thing I know is my friend's banging on the window, and he had a couple beers by this time, so he's banging on the window of the bus, and Matt looks over, he's like, does your friend want to come in? I'm like, if you want him in here, he can come in. He might be a little drunk right now. So he comes in, and my friend's name's Matt too. He comes in, he picks up a guitar off of that they have on one of the seats, and he just starts playing the Emery song on one of their guitars. I'm like,
you went full fanboy. Never go full fanboy. Yeah.
You're embarrassing me, man.
Right.
It was good awesome. Guys, man.
Hey James, watch me play Enter Sandman.
Right, yeah. It's one of those weird things. Well, and actually on that note, that one of my biggest goals for being on a podcast was because I'm this dude that was in a band that went nowhere 10 years ago, but I want to be on these podcasts, because I'm self-absorbed or whatever. But
hey, that's why I'm here.
Right. That was always one of my goals was to be on the Bad Christian Podcast. But I was always I got, you know, they're gonna, you know, people are gonna be like, oh, okay, you want to talk to this random dude, which they, you know, and Emery, everything they do turns to solid gold, so they could probably really sell that, but you know,
I'll try to put in a good word and see what happens.
I would, yeah, I mean, you know, if you don't want to, don't, but oh man, but yeah, so like Emery was great. Oh my God, like Emery really took off for me on their second album. The Question, and it's weird because it was so. The reason I liked it so much is because it was so opposite of everything I was listening to at that time.
Yeah, and that's the one we did the 10-year for recently here in like the last year or two.
Wow, that's awesome! Like I would have loved to have seen that live, but yeah, they were actually just in St. Louis recently, and I didn't go because I'm a piece of shit, you know. And I wanted to go,
Another
but like,
breakthrough.
Well, here's the thing, man. I got 2 kids at home, and it's very hard. Like, it's kind of a struggle sometimes to even come down and do the podcast. You know, like because you know my wife we're pregnant with a 3rd kid, and she's kind of like there comes a point where your baby starts to eat your brain. You know,
yeah,
and so she's a little bit less understanding than she has been in the past about that kind of stuff. So. It's one of those.
And apparently, she doesn't listen to the podcast, or you wouldn't be saying this stuff. Right?
Oh, she doesn't care. She gets it. And no, she doesn't listen. She told me that last night, actually, before bed. She was like, "I support you and whatever you want to do, but I'm not going to listen to it." And I was like, "That's cool." But yeah, I mean, But yeah, Emery made a huge impact on me. Me Without You is actually a band that we have to talk about because, oh my God,
yeah.
like. I had never heard it. The first time I ever heard Me Without You was on a Norma Jean record, you know?
And Memphis Been Laid Waste, right?
Yeah, and I think that was most everybody's introduction to the band that wasn't from their like local scene, you know?
Exactly.
And
so at that point, did you get into A to B Life? Was it the first album?
A to B Life, yeah. And I thought it was great. I remember telling my friend Buddy, he's on the podcast sometimes. I remember telling Buddy, like, hey, dude, you know that ending part on Memphis Shall Be Laid to Waste where the guy's just like talking and screaming and he's just like, it sounds all random, but it like all fits together perfectly, you know? And he's like, yeah, you know? And I was like, yeah, that dude has his own band and it sounds like that all the time, you know?
I believe the presentation was it's the Beatles with the guy from Memphis Shall Be Laid to Waste on it.
Right, yeah. It was like kind of this cool indie, which is really weird because I recently got the pleasure of listening to their demo called I Never Said I Was Brave, and that's like
Before
almost yeah, it's like basically like straight hardcore.
Yeah, it's a little more like punkish and hardcore.
Yeah.
You know what I always thought about A to B Life? I always thought A to B Life, I didn't compare it to Beatles or even now where you'd say they might be a little Bob Dylan style.
Yeah.
I almost compared it to being new metal guitars with like spoken word / shouty vocals, you know, almost like a guy's reciting poetry, like a beat poet on top of a little bit of new metal type guitars and drums, like just really simple riffs, but really good structures and kind of like, you know, just something you hadn't heard before. It's a band that like, unless Aaron started that band unless Aaron started that band, I can't imagine him going to try out for a band and the rest of the guys being like, yeah, this is exactly the vocalist that we're looking for.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, that's how you get I Never Said I Was Brave. You know, he eased him into it a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, because at first they're playing these like super heavy riffs or whatever, and he's just like shouting over it and in kind of a random manner, you know, and then you get to A to B Life and it's like totally like indie rock refined, you know, over the top of it. And I loved that record, but the thing I liked about Me Without You was kind of, it almost seems like over the course of their records, there's been a little bit of like personal enlightenment for Aaron. Like he was like angry, just like we all were, you know, the first time we heard A to B, you know, angry and angsty and all that stuff. And then you get to like Catch for Us the Foxes, and it's like more, it's like still like, he talks about a lot of like deep personal things in that, but like, I don't know, it's, it seems more enlightened. And you get to Brother Sister, and it's like, yeah, everything's okay. We're all going to get together and have potlucks and eat and be hippies, you know? And then like you get to, and they just go blast completely out into space after that, you know? Like, and I've loved everything.
I think it was a natural progression. And I think that it aged with the people that came into it, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, as you're in your 30s now, it's like, okay, this is music that is still something that like I don't feel ashamed to show people at work, or I don't think they're going to drop their jaw when they hear it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're right. When it goes back to like A to B Life, when you listen to Gentleman, which is one of my favorite songs of all time, everything stops and he just says, "And you better be alone," you've got shivers, down your spine because it sounds so damn creepy.
Right. A little rapey, yeah.
And we're back to rapey.
Back to rapey.
Right.
The theme, if you have titles for this, the title for this is "It's a Little Rapey."
Right. That's definitely going to be a
Google
hashtag
searchability.
for sure. Hashtag kind of rapey.
Yeah.
But
So was your favorite album? I feel like I almost always assume everybody's favorite album is Catch vs. the Foxes, but that's not the case for me.
Yeah.
What was your favorite album?
My favorite album by Me Without You is actually one of the newer ones. It's 10 Stories.
Okay, that's really respectable. For me, I think I have to get in. Like, I've listened to all the newer stuff, but I've only given it one or two spins.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like A to B Life has a nostalgia good for me.
Sure.
Just in the same way that with Norma Jean, with Bless the Martyr has a nostalgia good, but I know that some of their later albums might be more musically inclined or sound, But I think as they progressed and they went to Catch vs. the Foxes, I think that to me that was just a step to get to where they are today.
Sure.
And the best step for me was Brother Sister. I think Brother Sister had the perfect meld of everything that they had over the years in my eyes.
I jump back and forth between Catch vs. the Foxes and Brother Sister, just because.
Yeah.
When I say Catch for Us the Foxes is my favorite, it's because it's got January 1979. But then that little part of my brain that remembers the first time I heard Yellow Spider, then that shifts to, okay, Brother Sister is my favorite.
And January 1979, actually, when we first started American Standards, we used to cover a few songs, and that was one of the songs, just because that's something that we all really nerded out over. We did a cover of that, and we did a cover of Rather Be Dead by Refused before
nice.
Refused started playing again. And you can't really play a song from a band that's still playing that song.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
We unless they're like a classic band from like the 80s or something, But
yeah, unless it's Poison, right? You can do Poison covers and Led Zeppelin covers, maybe.
Well, we've beat around the bush long enough. Let's talk about Norma Jean.
Excuse me while I queue up Polar Similar.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like you guys know something about Norma Jean that I don't, or maybe I just read into it wrong, because as I listened to one of your episodes, unless it's just the fact that you guys are huge fans of it, I remember you guys both made the simultaneous comment, let's not even talk about Norma Jean, or something. It was lost on me, but I want to know what's that story.
Well, we want to talk about, we're all big fans of Norma Jean. Huge. Fanboys, we think the Annie Mother's good. It's one of those, it's one of those things with Norma Jean where I have obviously loved them since I heard their first note. And they've...
Their first diminished chord?
Yes.
Their first Scrooge chord?
Yeah. An Avalanche in D minor. No, but obviously Bless the Martyr Kiss the Child had the same impact on me that Blood and Fire did a few years earlier, because it was literally the most insane thing I'd ever heard. Now, granted, there were other things out at that. It wasn't like Blood and Fire in the sense that what we got with Bless the Martyr Kiss the Child was kind of the craziest thing we'd heard in Christian metalcore, not counting Training for Utopia.
Good callback. I love Training too.
Oh yeah. They had the real chaos, but with
Botch is another great one.
Botch, yeah. Well, if you listen to "Oh God, the Aftermath" by Norma Jean, you've heard Botch. It's almost the same thing. Even though I'm going to go ahead and say it's a tribute because I'm a fanboy. I'm not going to say it's a ripoff, especially because Corey has pretty much said that he wrote a lot of the songs on that record, so I'm not going to say anything about him. But Bless the Martyr Kiss the Child, it was it was your classic Norma Jean lineup, right? Josh Scoggin, Scoggin, I don't really know how it goes, but he obviously was such a great singer on that record. I mean, you'd had Throwing Myself by Ludacris before that, but this was a whole different beast. But
so is Josh era Norma Jean the your pick or your Norma Jean of choice, or?
Well, it's the Dark Horse Ensemble, right? It's like a Star Wars movie where a Star Wars movie with Luke, Han, and Leia is what you want. And so I feel like the Dark Horse Ensemble for Norma Jean includes Josh Scoggin, Although, weirdly enough, it also includes Corey. So my analogy doesn't really make a lot of sense. But Because Corey said like he is Norma Jean, you know, as far as I'm concerned at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, he's been in it the longest, right?
Right. It's so funny too because people still call him the new singer. It's like, dude, he is the band. Like, you know,
I think Josh has that power though. Like for some reason, and not to discount him because everything he's done has been fantastic from going to the Chariot and even now 68.
Oh yeah.
But he has that power to just draw people into everything he does. You know.
Right. Well, it's so funny too because everybody talks about how impressive his vocals were on "Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child," but it's like, well, there's obviously distortion on it. One.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like whenever I used to practice in my garage with friends, and I would like run my mic through a distortion pedal, you know, just to make it sound more raw because I just couldn't do the vocals yet, you know. And
as you watch him come in and fill in for some of these Norma Jean shows, you can tell the difference between the two. And I don't feel like Josh has the same stamina that Corey has. You know, I think Josh hands the mic to the crowd more often than actually singing.
Sure, yeah, I could see that. But
he's fantastic at everything he does, and the biggest thing for Josh is, and I know we're talking about Norma Jean, but I think the biggest thing for Josh is he's just an amazing songwriter. He's not shredding, but he's writing interesting parts,
right?
That just haven't been done before.
Right, and those lyrics, man, like the lyrics on "Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child" are like so simple yet profound. You know,
yep.
like. And it was so funny too because I actually had to learn the lyrics to that record because they're printed in the book, kinda. Like they're really hard to find, and so just
you didn't go to dark lyrics or planet lyrics or whatever it is,
right? And I don't, yeah, exactly. And I think I probably had a really abysmal internet connection at the time, so that wouldn't have been my first choice to go look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm on actually right now. I haven't been able to really Google anything because I'm still on dial-up. So if you hear me yelling at my mom that I'm on the phone, that's probably why.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
No.
I'm on the phone, Mom. God, but yeah, like Norma Jean is just. I mean, for me and Joe and Buddy especially. We have another host named Josh, and Josh is more of our. Josh kind of keeps us in line as far as like he's more of your like mainstream, like your average metal fan, you know.
He's grounded.
Yeah, not saying that he's average, but like he's not like me where like I'll listen to something and be like, oh my God, the vocals are horrible, but the rest of it's good. You know, Josh is more like Josh is more like okay, well, I'm not going to eat a chocolate cake mixed with shit, you know. So, but as far as like me and Joe and Buddy go, we're really, really into stuff like Norma Jean and Hope's Fall and stuff like that. And so Norma Jean, the reason we said let's not talk about Norma Jean is we have this grand idea in our head that we're going to have some huge episode on Norma Jean. We're going to get Corey to be on it, you know, like
tweet him, man. It might work.
That's
right.
happening, right?
Every tweet I've done has been effective to this point.
Right. So anytime I need something done, I tweet you and then you retweet our tweet. Yeah. Like,
there you go.
You're like, no, you can't dilute it. It'll be 50% effective. Yeah. But yeah, so that's why we're like, we're not going to talk about that right now because we're like, I don't know, it's almost like we're trying to keep the Norma Jean episode a secret. Like,
my one Norma Jean story is one thing I will say is like we've played with Norma Jean so many times, but we haven't really hung out with them very much. Like out of the 7 or 8 times that we've played with them in the last 4 or 5 years, we've only exchanged a few words. Now, when we played with 68, we hung out with them and talked to them every time. And hell, when we played with Every Time I Die, like we were drinking before the show. They invited us back to the hotel after the show to drink.
I believe that.
Professional wrestling with them.
Right.
But Norma Jean just hasn't the same thing.
Sure.
But my personal, I guess, introduction to Norma Jean, I think I've told this before, but I was literally, this is my band, and maybe I don't know when Norma Jean started, so that might be completely wrong here, but I think it was around like 2003-ish when I was playing for another band, and I went into a print shop or printing flyers to promote a show. This other promoter just happened to be at the print shop, and she hands me a flyer and she says, hey, come check out this metalcore band or this hardcore band. And I'm like hardcore, and I'm thinking hardcore like Black Flag and like that type of stuff. And she's like, no, this is what they're calling hardcore now.
Right.
And it was Norma Jean, and it might have been a few years before that, but then that's when I kind of actually got into it, around that Bless the Martyr time.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. We were kind of the same way. It's me and Buddy were driving because Buddy actually would drive me to school. He would drive me to school every morning. We would listen to music, and I'd picked up a copy of Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child, and I put it in. And at that time, I guess I was probably the first one on board with extreme music. And then my friends kind of followed suit afterwards, after just, probably Stockholm Syndrome.
We definitely had sympathy for him.
Yeah, so I pop in Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child, and I remember buddies just like, this is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. He's like, I can't even tell what's going on, because to the untrained ear, it just sounds like pure chaos. And it's weird now because when I listen to Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child, it almost sounds like a melodic record,
because how your perception has changed.
Right. Well, it's just so ingrained,
Yeah, I felt the same way about the Chariot. The first time I had given the Chariot some listens before American Standards, but I was never super impressed by the first thing that I listened to, which I think was the Unsung album. I just thought this is, it's a little rough. Like the recording's obviously not good, but it's purposefully not good. And I just couldn't get behind it. And then as I joined American Standards, all the guys were super into the Chariot. That's like their number one influence. And it wasn't until I think Long Live came out that I really got it. And I said, okay, this makes sense, and I kind of went back and started finding some appreciation for it. Because just like you said, some of the early stuff, not only was it just insanely chaotic and not a lot of structure, but the recording itself was also a little harsh,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, with the Chariot, it's weird because it's hard to talk about Norma Jean without talking about the Chariot. And Norma Jean, obviously, Josh leaves. He starts this band called the Chariots. The first one I heard by them was their debut album. I mean, I was waiting for it to come out, and it was called Everything is Alive, Everything's Breathing, Nothing is Dead, Nothing is Bleeding. And I remember listening to it thinking like, well, first of all, this just sounds like Norma Jean. Like because for the most part, it really did. That first Chariot record really just sounds like it wants to be Bless the Martyr Part 2. The harsher vocals are there. There's not really anything close to what you would call a song structure.
Do you think that was purposeful? Like he did that to draw everybody in so he could kind of get more creative on future things? Or do you think it was just, completely...
It's just the record he wanted to make.
I think it was just guys that... I think it was just a bunch of guys that were playing with Josh Scoggin and were huge fans and wanted to kind of
make him happy.
Live out their Norma Jean fantasy on stage, Yeah. And I think that's what they did. I remember them getting a lot more creative on their Fiance record, which just sounded like not so chaotic as far as like feedback goes, and because they really just let their equipment make a lot of the noise before that. Whereas I feel like on the Fiance they started trying to write more like vicious, more chaotic songs.
Yeah.
And that sounded really cool, and I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And then you jump ship over to Norma Jean, and it's completely changed at this point. Like they put out Oh God, the Aftermath, which I think was good enough to satiate fans of Bless the Martyr, Kiss the Child. Yeah,
and that was 06 or so. That one actually won a Grammy too.
Yeah. I
mean, or was nominated at least.
I remember being huge because everybody's biggest fear was like, okay, Josh is gone, so what are the vocals going to sound like?
And I think that, like, I mean, this is maybe going to piss you guys off. I think I fell off pretty quickly after Bless the Martyr. Not for the fact that I listened to the stuff and I didn't like it. I just had found other stuff.
Sure.
And I didn't come back actually till recently over the last few years, and then start listening to all this stuff that had come out, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and realizing, wow, why did I not listen to this?
Right.
Our guitarist, Corey, his favorite album is actually Anti-Mother, which also might start a little bit of a ruckus.
Not really. Not really. The Anti-Mother's rock solid. It just doesn't sound like a Norma Jean record,
Yeah. I think it was when I first heard the new vocals. I think I was just on board with Josh, and I heard the new ones, and I remember hearing the singing, and this is stupid of me thinking back, but at the time I remember thinking, this singing sounds a little nu metal-ish, and that's when like it wasn't cool to like nu metal at that time for someone that was in that type of band, So it was like, okay, I'm going to move to something else.
Sure.
But going back, I love it. And then Wrongdoers. I mean, when I heard Wrongdoers at first, I'm like, that's when I needed to go back and listen to all the stuff that I missed out on, because it was, Wrongdoers was like, wow, this is some of the best stuff that in my opinion, that they had done, that had the mix of the old, but also a lot of polish to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, it's funny too because some of their more chaotic songs now almost sound a little bit like Chariot songs, which I always thought was kind of funny. For whenever they decide that they're going to go back to heavy, like they don't go back to Bless the Martyr, they go back to like mid Chariot career style songs.
They could fill the space with the Chariot being gone now, maybe.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, with Norma Jean, obviously at some point in the future, we're going to have this amazing podcast on them that's going to change your life.
Hype.
Yeah.
Hype it up.
Yeah, like literally Norma Jean's going to show up and play, in your basement, like right in front of you after you listen to that podcast.
Don't tease me.
So, but yeah, so there's only a couple more bands I'm going to cover just because we've been at this for like an hour and a half now, but...
People stopped listening a long time ago.
I'm sure. Yeah,
you can say anything at this point.
Yeah, too long, didn't listen. Yeah. But we should do what Travis does and break it up into two. But... No, what I think is funny is, so when listening to American Standards, this could be completely unintentional, but I got kind of a latter-day Spitfire kind of vibe.
That's actually, I don't even listen to that, so that's completely unintentional.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, you should listen to that because it's great.
Now I feel embarrassed. Like I feel like I'm not cool anymore. I've lost all the respect here.
Oh no, you're cool. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Did you ever listen to any Spitfire?
I do get that all the time, though. I do get the whole like when we play shows now, especially being in my 30s and playing for sometimes people that are literally half my age.
Yeah.
People will say, like, I remember when Touche Amore was first starting getting big, and people would talk to me about Touche Amore at shows, and I'm like, I have no clue who these guys are. And then we play with them, and there's 400 kids piling on top of each other to sing the words. And
you're like, what the hell have we done wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I feel really, really old sometimes playing this kind of music,
Yeah.
So Spitfire, the band name Spitfire, I have to check that out.
Yeah, well, okay, so they would definitely be a hidden gem on Solid State. They started on Solid State, and they put out a very chaotic metalcore record called The Dead Next Door, which is an album that's much better than the movie that it's named after. And that record just annihilates. The only issue I have with it is that it despite being very chaotic, the vocals are very low in the mix and a little indistinguishable, which isn't like a bad thing, but it's not great.
I feel like I'm the opposite on American Standards. They turn me so high up all the time, and I'm always begging to be lower in the mix.
Yeah.
But I'm always so high and so dry, where I listened to, like growing up, listening to hardcore and a lot of hardcore punk, where sometimes you can't even distinguish what's going on with the vocals.
Right. No, I mean, I appreciated the vocals being more clear, though, because like when it's that kind of band, it's like really, I want to kind of hear what's being said, because I want to hope that the lyrics are just as crazy as the music, Yeah. And so, A+.
And that's why I appreciated bands like Me Without You, is because it really put the lyrics at the forefront. Like, if anything, my lyric writing is influenced greatly by bands like Me Without You, and surprisingly, people like Tom Waits,
Tom Waits, yeah.
Yeah, they're so inventive and kind of like, I don't know, they just take on this whole new beast, and that's what I like to do, I almost challenge myself to do that.
Well, definitely check out Spitfire's later albums. Now, did you ever hear of a band called Scarlet?
Oh yeah.
Cult Classic?
Wait, Cult Classic is that album name or?
Cult Classic is the name of Spitfire, or not Spitfire, Scarlet's first record.
Okay, I'm guilty of not knowing the album name, to be honest.
That's fine. What I'm getting at here is that basically the vocalist from Scarlet left the band and joined Spitfire. And they put out 2 records that were just, in my opinion, very almost perfect in that style. I think you'd dig it. If you like your own band, I think you'll dig it.
I hate that stuff. It sounds horrible.
I hate our stuff. I just do this for the paycheck. Yeah. But
yeah, right. I'm doing this for the $12 we get off Spotify every month.
Hell yes. Well, I listen to you guys on Spotify, and then I listen to you on Google Play. So.
I appreciate it. That paid for me to go to Power Rangers.
There you go. I like it. So is that viable?
That's what we call a throwback.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm like changing the subject so much, but like, is that viable? Like Spotify and Google Play and all that? Like, does it? Okay. I would imagine. Don't you have to have like more than 1 million downloads or something?
Like 4 guys. Yeah, it's not at all viable from that standpoint. Like we, not even being sarcastic, we'll get a check from our things that are streaming media,
right,
for $20 or $30 a month.
Oh wow.
So, and that, that's, if you're getting, 20, 30,000 plays, you're getting a fraction of a penny,
Right.
So,
it's nothing.
So it's nothing. Where now iTunes and Amazon is a little bit better, but not much. It's still, maybe $1 or so for every time that someone downloads a $10 album.
Right.
Wow. But where we get the majority of our money is when people purchase stuff off our Bandcamp.
Okay.
Bandcamp's great for us, and then merch really. So when we're playing shows, on top of our guarantee, we've got these T-shirts and buttons and stickers and everything else, and that's really where the money comes from. That's what supports us to record. We've spent about $6,000 on this new album so far, which is very small by the standards of any large band, but also very expensive for a band that's decided to do it independently.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Our debut album cost $500.
Yeah. See, I mean,
Thanks, Travis.
That's almost like you can do that now because especially with how home studios are, you can really do that. With this new one, we decided to spend more money than we've ever spent on an album. We went to Los Angeles to record at this place called King Size Sound Labs, where they did like Bad Religion, they did the Mars Volta, they did the Last Let Live album, they've done like Andrew WK.
Oh, cool.
So just like a big mix of stuff,
Yeah.
But it became really expensive, not only from renting out the studio, which was a fantastic studio, but also driving to and from Los Angeles, because we can't stay in Los Angeles for the couple of months it takes to record.
Right.
So we're driving back and forth, so we still keep our day jobs, because like I said, the Spotify paycheck is not paying the bills.
I hear you, man.
I think if we were on the road, if we're a little bit younger, and I used to do this when I was younger, if we're on the road nonstop, we'd be able to make a living off of it.
Sure.
But since we're not doing that, we're going out on tour every couple months, and then playing like weekends and things like that.
Right.
It's the only way that we survive through it is by selling things like T-shirts.
I gotcha. That's cool. So we
not to take away any of the allure of being in a band. I mean, follow your dreams, kids.
Yeah, no, it's great though. Dude, there's no better feeling than being in a band and playing live shows, even if nobody's there. Like it's just there's just something about getting up and doing it that for whatever reason is sustaining, and it's kind of a bait and switch because you're basically giving up everything for it. But
Oh yeah. It's honestly the best thing about being in a band is, for me, is it gives you these experiences that you wouldn't have any other way. It's
right.
like I wouldn't be, visiting, for example, on the show when we're coming through Kansas City. I wouldn't be going to Kansas City and roaming around downtown and finding different restaurants and bars and things to kill the day
right.
if I wasn't in a band.
Right, for sure.
It's taken us all around the states. 95% of the people I talk to on a regular basis are people I know just because I've been playing music for so long.
Gotcha. That's awesome. We're so when you guys are coming, you said you're coming like the 24th?
Yep, the 24th we're playing in Kansas City at this place called Bubba Spins.
Okay.
Which I don't know anything about this place, but I do hear they do some really cool DIY shows there.
Okay.
And we like to, when we can, if it's a place that's like not like it's DIY, but it's not going to get shut down like the second we get to the venue or start playing.
Right.
We like to do those shows because we'd rather be in a room that fits 100 people and have 100 people in the room than be in a place that fits 800 people and have 100 people in the room.
Sure. Yeah. Just kind of it's a boner killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I think I'm probably going to call it at this mark just because I'm tired and lazy. But we had definitely.
I've got to eat dinner here too. It's probably late for you guys, right? You guys are 2 hours ahead of Arizona.
Yeah. So yeah, it's about almost 9 here.
You're 30. You need to turn in. It's 9 p.m.
Yeah. What time is it, Joe?
And you've got
it's 9:15.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Not only are you 30, but you've got 2 kids and you're expecting another. You're a very tired man right now.
Yes, I am, and I worked. Wait, I think
you also don't learn your lesson the first 2 times. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
I feel like we broke through with a few things tonight.
Right. Yeah. We'll get together and do a counseling session really soon. But this is the point in the show where we are going to let you plug away.
Well, fair enough. I don't have a whole lot to plug other than the new album American Standards is releasing. It's called Anti-Melody.
Oh, yeah.
It comes out actually April 28th, where we're doing a show in Phoenix, Arizona at the Rebel Lounge to release it. And then after that, throughout May, we're going to be touring mainly through the Midwest. We start on the 18th, and then we tour through the Midwest out to Tennessee. We wrap back around. We ended in Las Vegas, I believe.
Okay.
It's like 10 or 12 states in total, and all those dates are on our social media. So if you go to anything that you can possibly think of /American Standards, we're most likely on it.
Sweet. Pornhub
or you
/
can find
American
us.
Standards.
Exactly. We're on that as well. And like in the comment section, we're like, hey, check out my band when you're done.
Wash your hands first. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're also on all the, obviously, like iTunes and Amazon and Spotify. That's where you can also pre-order the album. So if you pre-order the album, you'll get it the day it comes out. If you get a physical copy of it, you'll get it a week before it comes out, which is pretty soon here. So that's all great stuff. We've got new videos out. So we just put out a video for Writer's Block Party, our first single, which is a kind of fun video. We try to take away the tough guy attitude and just do something fun with our friends. And then we've got another video that we're actually premiering. If anybody's listening right now, or depending on when you post this on iTunes, it's going to be this Monday coming up. Revolver Magazine is actually premiering our next music video for a song called Carpe Diem tomorrow.
That's awesome. We'll try to post up some of those videos on our pages as well.
Good deal. We'll do the same for anything on this, man.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. We're this was super exciting. I know we couldn't stay on topic or anything, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that we can kind of do stuff like this in the future. And what I'm going to tell anybody that's ever part of the podcast is the door is always open. So like if you see that like in 2 weeks we're going to talk about such and such band, hit us up.
Are you talking to Corey directly right now from Norma Jean, or are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you, but I'm also,
He's always talking to Corey.
Yeah, hey, Corey. Yeah, I'm always talking to Corey. I'm always talking to Emery, it's always happening. Always talking to Travis,
Yeah, man, I would love that. I mean, hell, maybe next time we come on and we talk about something like Ferret or something, and
it'd be great.
I'll try to keep you a little more on topic. I like to talk a lot and go in a different direction, especially when people aren't asking me how'd you get your band name stuff. Right. So I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, we did as well. So definitely the door is always open, man, and we will we'll look forward to talking to you. I can't guarantee we'll make it on the 24th because we're in St. Louis, which is a little further away from Kansas City than is comfortable, but we'll anything can happen.
That's fair enough, and I'll let you know next time we're in your area. Maybe we'll be playing a basement with a Nine Inch Nails cover band.
Sounds good to me, man. I'll be there.
Hey, take it easy, guys.
Yeah, you too. Have a good night.
This has been episode 10 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. Shit, I was going to ask him to do a bookend for us.